Good afternoon. How is everyone? Awesome. Have a good lunch. Everyone nice and full and awake and caffeinated and all that good stuff, right? Awesome. All right. My title of my talk is The Pillars of Continuous Incident Response. We're going to talk about incident response, kind of really how it's that ultimate team sport. So, of course, my talk, a little bit about myself, high level of the IR process, the pillars of incident response that I like to call it, an actual walkthrough of the template that we use on the Cisco IR team that we use when we're drafting communications, indicators of compromise, all that, and then Q&A, of course, at the end. So a little bit about myself. Of course, like I said, team leader for the Cisco Security Incident Response Services team. My background spans law enforcement, academia, and then, of course, consulting. Being a former cop, I spent 10 years, which is really where I got my start here in Indiana. I was involved in, of course, internet crimes against children. I was on the Secret Service Electronic Crimes Task Force. So spent a lot of my time, going back to the old days when we were, our investigation started, just common eBay fraud, right? And really how everything kind of evolved really over that time. I've been doing IR, digital forensics incident response now for over 11 years. And like I said, I'm an Indiana resident when I'm not, of course, traveling or work. Married, have a family. I also like to coach youth football as well. And that's kind of a lot where, a lot where my talk stemmed from is, things and pitfalls that we see in organizations every day, from communication and a range of things every day that organizations continue to, fail at, right? And how do we get better? Because at some point, depending on your role in security, right, you've probably responded to an incident at some point. So, quick disclaimer, views are my own, of course, not intended to be legal advice, and of course, always consult with an attorney for legal advice. If you've done incident response, you're probably familiar with the incident response lifecycle, right? Preparing that identification and containment phase, right? One of the worst things to do during incident response is to underscope an incident. Maybe we shut off the C2 channel that the attackers were leveraging, but we didn't realize that, Mimikatz had popped domain credentials, right, on our domain controller. So, that identification and containment piece are really a circular process. As security professionals, we understand that. We really understand that containment, and then moving towards eradication, recovery, and post-incident activity. And this is really the life cycle, that we follow. Prepare. Train how you'll fight because you'll fight how you train. I think that's most important. Depending on your organization, building that muscle memory. So in the event an incident does occur, it's not really something that you have to think about, right? It's just like, hey, we practice this, we rehearse this, we know exactly what we need to do during an incident. Oftentimes, I see that, we forget about the people component. Well, who's ordering lunch? Right? What about our network security engineer that's working 80 hours that week? Has anyone let human resources know that, hey, he's probably going to have a lot of overtime this week? So, when they're not calling questioning, when you're trying to, kind of keep that incident under wraps, depending on what type of incident it is. Maybe it was a third-party notification from the FBI, whatever it may be, right? So the people component, is really very important during incident response. So the pillars: prepare, collaborate, and train. So how does that really transcribe? Having an incident response plan, right? Preparing, having those discussions. The communication is huge, and that's often one that is constantly organizations miss, is communication. It's the most important thing. The example I used earlier, an actual true notification where forgot about letting the proper resources know, the proper folks know that, hey, our network security team is going to be working a lot of overtime this week. So it's the little things that are important. And then, of course, tabletop exercises. Anyone done tabletop exercises in your organization? So having an incident response plan, right? Does your organization have an incident response plan? I see this more and more organizations are building a formal incident response plan, or maybe it's just, ad hoc, right? We downloaded some things that we found, on the internet, and this is our incident response plan. So really trying to grow and mature that process. We wear, as InfoSec, we wear many hats in an organization, right? I'm sure if you're a junior, an entry-level security analyst, or whatever your role is, network security, you probably wear a ton of hats in your organization really every day. So you're getting pulled a million different ways. So we all wear many hats in our daily roles in our organization. How do you create an incident response plan? There are many frameworks out there. Having that computer security incident response team, and the important piece is, having reporting, classification, and response really built in. As I mentioned, there are many frameworks. The key thing is, really pick one and follow it, right? DHS CERT has a good one out there. SANS, of course, has published a lot as well. Then NIST, big fan of the NIST documentation because it really, it just doesn't say thread the needle, but it really walks you through how to thread that needle. How do you handle incidents? How do you respond to incidents? How do you build out plans? Then of course, FIRST. Anyone familiar with FIRST? Very good organization. So the bottom line is, whatever that framework's going to be, the important piece is really just kind of pick one and stick to it. And the biggest thing is, getting buy-in, having an executive or a CISO, right, that really signs off, that's the sponsor of that incident response plan, because you could create an IR plan, and unless you have buy-in on the business side, it's really going to it's going to be just one of these another security thing that we do, and it's going to fall over. So buy-in is extremely important. Of course, earlier I talked about SANS and the NIST documentation, the 800 series. Documentation is important. Anyone familiar with JP CERT, Japan's Computer Emergency Incident Response Team? They have some really great documentation. So if you're wanting to, look for that attacker, hunt an attacker in event logs, or maybe PS exec, write some of the other ways, PowerShell, some of the other means that attackers are leveraging in our environments. JP CERT actually put out a very good how-to. And some of the testing that they've done. So if you're a blue team or a forensic or an IR person, being able to see a lot of those artifacts, the event logs, master file table, U.S. Journal of Forensics, all that type stuff. Very cool stuff. And like I said, they've actually published a lot of good documentation as well. So when you're building out your CCERT team, right, it comes in many different flavors. One of the key components is get legal and communications involved. Human resources, IT, and often overlooked is business continuity and disaster recovery. Those folks bring a very great perspective and knowledge to building out an incident response program and plan. Because at the end of the day, what are our jobs as security professionals, right? To support the business. In the event of a disaster, whether it's a cyber security disaster, IT disaster, whatever it may be, our job is to support that business function at the end of the day. The technical capabilities, I'm a very big advocate of training. Like I said earlier, train how you fight because you'll fight how you train, right? Understanding what your capabilities are from a technical perspective, right? And then if you need to leverage an outside firm or a consultancy to bring in that knowledge, that's also very important. Getting your CCERT team to meet on a monthly basis, have incident response happy hour or something like that on a Friday. But identifying those core team members, it doesn't. And you'll notice it's not necessarily all security, right? It's really made up of a cross section of really however organization is laid out, right? Maybe we just have one person that does security. Maybe we don't have any, internal legal counsel. Maybe we don't have a human resource person. Our IT person is a very skeletal crew. So again, going back to what I was saying earlier, having leveraging the talent and capabilities that we have in house is very important. Building out that incident classification and incident severity, right? I've seen some incident response plans that when we're doing interviews with folks, they can't even get the own terminology right. You don't have to have some fancy type of terminology, right? Minor, severe, catastrophic. Simplicity is critical. Communication and developing whenever we're building out an incident response plan and building out playbooks. Simplicity is a good thing. Building that muscle memory, because in the event of an incident, stress is high, livelihoods are on the line. It's really important to be able to not even think about it. It just happens as well. But also important too is, as it relates to classification, not every event, is necessarily an incident, right? If you work in a SOC, I'm sure you probably are often fatigued by the number of alerts that you probably get on a daily business, which is a huge, from a talent pool perspective, analyst fatigue in a SOC, if you depending on the maturity of your SOC, I mean, that's, as security professionals, we want to do interesting things. We don't want to be fatigued by, a level 1 alert every time, something comes in. We want to find the badness. We want to find the needle in the haystack, within our environments. Establishing relationships, outside of an organization. It's very important, especially if it's we'll just say a 3-letter agency notification, having a partnership with your local FBI office, Secret Service, if you're active in InfraGard, ISAC, all these different organizations that will allow sharing of information. I think some of the best, and when I start talking about intel here in a little while, some of the best intel is just, networking, like we're here at BSidesIndy, right? Talking to folks, sharing war stories. I mean, that really does pay off in the long run. Our DNA, as humans, as security professionals, we want to connect with folks, right? We're here for gaining knowledge, for learning, for networking, grow our career. Maybe we're new to, InfoSec, and we're wanting to, really, get into security, right? It's our DNA as humans. We want to communicate. We want to interact. Maybe it's an IRC. Maybe it's Slack, right? Twitter, whatever. We want to connect with folks. Embedding that communication into your IR program and your process is critical. That's why communication I have as being one of the critical pillars to incident response, right? Talking to folks, over-communicating things. You would be surprised in the heat of the battle. I can think of various incidents that, my team that we've been involved with, right? I mean, someone finds an awesome indicator, but maybe it's not communicated, and then we overlook it. We document it, right? Taking notes, we document, move on, then maybe you go back and revisit it, or someone else looks at it. It's like, wow, there's our smoking gun. So that communication piece, I say embedding communication into our DNA, talking about it, sharing things. I think sometimes that's one of our Achilles heels in InfoSec, because we don't like to share. We like to keep things really tight instead of trying to extract ideas and share them, for the betterment of the community. Coordination of internal communications. I mean, that's really important. If an organization is breached, the last thing I want to do, if I'm an employee and my information's compromised, I don't want to hear about it on the news. I want my company to tell me about that incident. So, coordination of those, internal communications is very important. Just like, kind of really beyond the scope of our audience here, but, the external communications, right? When we need to let customers, clients, when brand and reputation, are on the line, having a playbook for communications, is very important. Some of the best, from a InfoSec standpoint, some of the best playbooks when I had a chance to create some review are the ones that, if I'm a junior analyst, this is my first day on the job, right? I've been here for a day. I should be able to take some type of playbook. Maybe it is, investigating a phishing email, whatever it may be, right? Or investigating Windows event logs, looking for, the event ID, successful logins. What does that mean? Creating a playbook so anyone, doesn't matter if you're junior or mid, everyone understands exactly how we approach that problem. Creating some type of playbook, a communication, a document is very important. Anyone read Clifford Stoll's The Cuckoo's Egg? Classic, right? What was the difference in what Clifford Stoll did? And I remember this passage in the book. Documented. Well, Cliff, you took notes. You documented the attacker, right? He took copious notes. Document really, everything, everything that you do. Something to be mindful of, and I'll get to this here shortly as it relates to attorney-client communications. I'll go back to that one. It's actually my next slide. Case study. I told myself I wasn't going to beat up on Target, but there's many lessons to be learned from this. So the National Law Review magazine, and going back to, remember what I was just talking about, communications, right? Attorney-client privilege for Target. So when all these lawsuits started, being tossed Target's way, there's a little irony in that statement, isn't there? So when all these lawsuits started, right, the trial court agreed that information sought by plaintiffs was protected from discovery. So what is discovery? In the event of civil litigation, It's that exchange of information, requesting documents, processes, documentation, all that. I mean, notes and all that stuff that could be summoned, at a later time. However, one thing that was critical that actually helped them, as far as shield them from more liability, according to this article and this attorney that wrote this article for National Law Review magazine, investigatory materials were clearly marked as privileged, prepared, and delivered directly to counsel. The incident response team understood this. So there was the rules of engagement, that understanding. The IR team knew exactly, the difference between, investigatory material and remediation reports, indicators of compromise, hash values, IP addresses, signatures, anything associated. Segregating that material really helped them as far as their overall scope. I don't remember what they ended up paying out. I mean, it was obviously in the millions of dollars. But one key aspect here, email plus lawyer plus request for advice equals privilege. That was actually one thing that the court actually found out. When you're doing, and I'll talk about remember tabletop exercises as being that other pillar, right, for incident response. Anytime, I work with organizations where you have the legal team involved. It's always interesting to see, depending on the scenario, the minute they invoke privilege, how that changes the communication. We're not going to use Slack anymore to talk about. We're going pens and paper and phone calls. So obviously, that varies, but that's always very interesting to see, during an incident, and really how that kind of changes things. So I'm going to dive in here to the communications template that we use. It's actually available on blogs.cisco.com. So free to download if you want. There's lots of templates out there, right? I know if you're familiar with Lenny Zeltzer of the SANS fame, he teaches that. I believe he still teaches the reverse engineering course. But he has the diamond model and some other things, and some of the templates, the kill chain, and different things and templates that you can download as well. It's on his website. So I mentioned that, but I also want, like I said, I want to do a dive here into our document. Like I said, this is available for download. All right, so this is one of those documents that's kind of been tweaked, kind of over time, right? Understanding who the audience is. Most executives, most folks want to be able to, to quickly access, the document. They want the lay of the land. Tell me what the summary is. Include all that, the indicators of compromise. Do a deep dive. I want that in there, but oftentimes that first section, they're not going to read past, that first section, right? So the latest update, providing the most recent information to leadership so they can stay informed and make key business decisions. Latest update, current impact, that's really important. Like I said earlier, one of the worst things to do during incident response is to underscope, an incident. Thinking you've, killed the C2 channel, but, forgetting about the back doors, and, the attackers already have domain admin still into the environment. So, it's always critical, is being able to really tie that to the incident. If it's something like Emotet, Quackbot, a lot of the banking Trojans that are out there, SMB vulnerabilities, right? Is there still the, as far as the organization getting, moving back to business as usual, what is that current impact? We have credentials that are compromised. So we've had credentials that are compromised. Let's talk about Quackbot. I'll use that, for example. That's a popular banking Trojan, Emotet and Quackbot, right? Key logging capabilities. That kind of changes notification, right? And kind of how I respond if, we've had X number of employees or users on our endpoints, right, that, had credentials that were compromised. So that changes things. Including that type of information within a template or a document is very important. Areas of concern, right, anything that may be involved. Like I said, this is free to download, take it, tweak it, do whatever you want to. If you don't want to use it, that's fine too. But there's some good information in here. Of course, if you have a way or template that you use, if you're doing any type of incident response, please share that as well. Action items, and this is what's great. It's so easy as security professionals, right, to go down a rabbit hole. We want to go down a rabbit hole what's necessary, but we don't want to waste spare brain or CPU cycles, right, going down, maybe chasing something down. if we don't need to. So document, those action items, right? What's the status? Who owns that? Is it Kanye West? Is it Jimmy Cho? Who is it? When was that requested? And we like to color coordinate things within our document so you can quickly visually say, okay, well, that's new, that's green, that's complete. That was just completed. So, like right here, patient 0, Win7 Lab IR memory forensic analysis. So I can quickly look at that and kind of see where the action items are, what needs to be done, and kind of, to own that. I mean, when the building's on fire, people's hair's on fire, being able to take all of that stuff and look at it is very important, right? To kind of, as you're continue to, work to containment, post-incident activity, being able to see exactly, what those action items are, right? So including all that stuff, post-incident activity may, analyze disk images, possibly, depending on where we're at and really what the scope is. Indicators of compromise, and all that, ongoing. Intelligence summary, and I just included this here from a recent blog post that I pushed out last week. So figure 1 below, and this is like the intelligence summary, this is where you're going to put indicators. This is going to be the meat of your report. This is where you're going to put indicators of compromise, really any intelligence. Maybe it's a threat actor group, right? When we're engaged in emergency response, we work very closely with Talos. So there's a lot of things that we will include from an intel perspective in this section of the report. So Sysmon, anyone using Sysmon on their endpoints? Sysmon for the win, right? It's free, can be noisy, it does require tuning, but if you think about, Mimikatz, in this example here, in this, I pulled down and ran the PowerShell invoke Mimikatz, and right here in our Sysmon event logs, again, I'm just using this to kind of demonstrate kind of maybe something that you would include here in your findings or intelligence summary section, right? But it's the Sysmon log, event ID 1, process create, right? Invoke Mimikatz, being pulled down. That invoke expression, that full string, being pulled down here as well. Now, depending on logging, right? I mean, I'm going to include any analysis in this section as well. So here, for example, using volatility, the YaraScan plugin. During memory forensic analysis using volatility's YaraScan plugin and the Mimikatz Yara rule, which of course is available right there on GitHub. Running this command, the local security authority dump module, right? Identifying Mimikatz being ran. So including that in the intelligence summary, right? The raw output, but in the current impact, being able to explain that to that business side. Okay, this is bad, right? You had Mimikatz in your environment. What does that mean, to the business side, right? Enterprise-wide password resets. That's painful for a CISO or an executive to have to hear and we got to worry about changing 50,000 credentials or whatever the number may be, right? So including that, but then in that current impact, really explaining why we are concerned that we have Mimikatz running in the environment. Just the output here. So current recommendations. Any recommendations that we may have. This is really good to include in here. Any recent discoveries, any recommendations that you made from a tactical perspective. Probably more than likely, if you're an enterprise defender, you're probably going to be maybe putting just some tactical stuff in here, right? Password changes, logging, right? Whatever it may be, we're going to include that in our current recommendation section. Previous incident summary. So when we're engaged with a client for emergency incident response, depending on what the cadence is, we're going to, if it's a daily cadence where we're meeting and kind of reviewing kind of the lay of the land, the scope, kind of where we're at, with the incident response, we're going to include previous updates in the bottom of this. These updates can grow to tens, and sometimes hundreds of pages, depending on the type of incident it is and the type of analysis required. But the bottom line is, on this document, your most recent information, including here at the top that way, depending on who the audience is, still a lot of executives like to read things on email, right? So having something in a Word format that they can read as well. As you can see, no really identifying information, trying to keep anything to identify the organization out there. Come up with a code name or whatever, right? So find a cool code name. Marvel or DC, depending on, superhero, right? Come up with a code name to use for this document. So that's, like I said, this document is available for download. And so feel free to use it, tweak it, whatever, but it's definitely, it's good. I mean, it's been battle tested and kind of refined, and we're constantly, we use it on our team, and we're constantly changing it to update it and really make it better. We try to simple, right? Update, so your executives, whoever your audience is, they see what we're doing on it. We have our action items, know who owns it, right? And that way we can make sure we're still progressing and working our way towards containment and eradication. All right, very important. It's so easy, in the heat of a battle to kind of get caught up on kind of, if it's let's just say it's a third-party notification, really the impact and day zero, right, from right when that incident happens. I always tell organizations, we'll get through today, we'll get through the next week, but let's also be thinking about 30, 60, 90 days out, right? I mean, that's important. I mean, everyone wants to get back to business as usual. During an incident, if it's a catastrophic event, people's livelihoods, jobs are on the line, right? I mean, we see that when, these major, when these breaches happen, folks' livelihoods are on the line. So it's very important to kind of be that calm, reassuring voice. I mean, that will pay dividends in the long run, and really focusing on using some type of formal document to focus on tactical goals, but then strategic as well, right? What a better time to get a security budget if you have an incident, right? That would be a strategic goal. What can we do to continue to move the needle, to evolve and get better? Crisp, concise communication, right? If your audience is maybe it's your security lead or whoever, leave the tech speak in there. That's fine. But if your audience is, depending on, I have some CISOs that, have more of a business background. Others, write Python scripts. So it really having that, that wide range, understanding what exactly they're going to understand, because you want to make sure that you're clear and concise in the information that you're relaying. One thing that's cool, working for Cisco, having a lot of the collaboration and communication tools that we have in place. Come up with something that you use for communication. I talked about Slack. We use Spark, other tools to communicate. But think of a out-of-band way that you could communicate. Okay, if you're using ServiceNow, if your IT ticketing portal is ServiceNow or whatever it may be, for your security, your incidents, you want to keep that entirely separate. Last thing you want to do is be using the same ticketing portal, right? Tip off the attacker. So that's something, come up with some type of out-of-band communication, that the security team is using to communicate during an incident. That's very important. Catastrophic, major, and minor. So what type of, these are examples of critical communication. I can tell you I've seen updates and briefings. How many times have, it seems like one of the biggest productivity killers is what? Meetings, right? Getting pulled into meetings, you look at your calendar, it's like, wow, I've got all these meetings I've got to go to. It's very important. I can tell you from being in the trenches and firsthand, when you start pulling, our security folks, our people off, hands off keyboard to jump in a meeting, that can be counterproductive, right? But having that incident commander that understands what everyone is working on, right? That's kind of managing that entire incident, right? From beginning to end, the entire life cycle. Sometimes, when we're involved, that's a hat that we wear because they're not mature and they need someone kind of being the tip of the spear to drive the incident. Let's get it done. Let's make it happen, right? Take care of our people, drive that incident to success. But I can tell you, I've seen when it comes to containment, and think about work, and even like say do workstation reimaging, right? Trying to rebuild workstations from a gold build, where we pull, why can we only rebuild 75 workstations an hour? Well, if we're pulling 15 folks off that are doing that task that's part of our containment remediation to jump on a bridge, you could book a 30-minute meeting, but how often do they usually go? 45 minutes, an hour. A lot of folks like to hear themselves talk, right? So that meeting carries on, and you're forgetting about what's critical to regarding the incident, to doing that. So it's good, depending on the incident, having that incident commander, whoever that's going to be, that incident coordinator, that can talk everything that's going on. If we've got third-party vendors in, right? I've worked some incidents where we're working, with, a global organization. There's probably dozens of us, different firms that are involved trying to help this customer respond, right? I can think of WannaCry, Netcha, those type of events last year that kept us busy. But being able to have someone that's driving that, knows what's going on, that's important. Because like I said, the last thing you want to do, start pulling folks away from the keyboard, and it takes the brain, 15 minutes to refocus. So if you're doing, maybe you're, doing some log analysis, right? Or doing something with PCAPs. All right. Well, every time my phone rings, we're delaying these action items that need to get done. So, I know I've really kind of hit home on that point, but that's so important. So depending on the type of event, if it's been a catastrophic event, oftentimes, we'll do like a morning and then an evening. But maybe in only one of those, we'll bring in our folks from all the different teams for that afternoon briefing. Because then again, you don't want to inundate people with meetings, because oftentimes it can be counterproductive. Kind of have to, during an incident, you have to pick your battles, right? You have to decide, okay, what is a priority? What has to get done? What can I go with here? So, tabletop exercise. Love doing tabletops, right? Testing that IR plan. How are our folks going to respond? Depending on who, if it's a technical tabletop, those are fun, right? We're building out a scenario. I can tell you some of the best ones that I've been involved with, sometimes with that business side, as well. Did one where we wanted to, part of it was to see if we can get domain admin over the phone. We created a custom executable, dropped it on 30 workstations. Well, part of it, the client wanted to test their help desk. How can our help desk respond to the incident? So they get an influx of calls, right? Folks are calling in. Myself and two my colleagues, other responders, our job was to be the social engineer. See if we could call in and get, the only thing we were provided with a name. So what did we do? We went out to LinkedIn, did a little research, find out about this person, called into the help desk. Hey, this is such and such. I just landed at the airport. I'm aware of the incident that's going on. I can't access my machine right now. I need you to reset my password. But because I can't access it on my mobile device because MDM's down, right? ActiveSync's down. I need you to give me the password over the phone. Oh, okay, yeah. And then 3 for 3 to get, password reset over the phone. So tabletop exercises are great. But the important thing, yes, there's documents. FEMA has, it's a little dated. Going back to 2012, FEMA has some good information and templates out there. My director, actually Sean Mason, actually has kind of conglomerated a lot and actually released it as well. We'll have it up here, the zip file that actually is on there's a blog post about it on his site. So templates and everything that are really out there to start creating your own tabletop exercise. I wish I would have bookmarked it, but I saw on Twitter someone recently posted about the Dungeons and Dragons themed tabletop. Rolling dice to see, okay, is my CISO available? Is my security team kind of letting the chips fall how they are, right? Because you could plan out a very well scripted tabletop exercise. Okay, bring all these folks into the room. I'm doing one next week, right? We're flying all these folks into one location. Okay, it's lunchtime. Let's break for lunch. We're not breaking for lunch. Why are we going to break for lunch? During an incident, is everyone going to stop what they're doing and take lunch? Right? Business has to kind of carry on as much as it can. During the tabletop. So tabletops are fun. I would really encourage you. Maybe you're the Lone Ranger. You're the only security person at your organization. You would be surprised how eye-opening doing a tabletop exercise can be, especially for the business folks. I've had some where, public relations and legal were like, wow, we had no idea that the security team had all this stuff they had to do. And then for the security team, it was like, wow, I didn't know that once we got to this point, I needed to make sure that I put a little watermark on my documents that said attorney-client privilege. So tabletop exercises are usually very eye-opening for organizations. So I would encourage you to do that and do a tabletop exercise. A technical, for a technical audience, these are fun. I love utilizing some of our cloud technology to build out a actual hands-on tabletop exercise. In a technical audience, you're going to be focused on what? The IR lifecycle. Identification, containment, eradication, reporting. the chain of command, doing lessons learned. We still do lessons learned and recommendations, and we're in the trenches every day. It's so important. Again, going back to building that muscle memory. So I don't have to think about responding. I know exactly what I need to do. I don't even have to think about it, right? It's just, that muscle memory is so important. And building tribal knowledge, So, we bring a group of folks in to do a tabletop exercise. Everyone kind of understands, what everyone's strengths are, weaknesses, sharing that so we can all learn and grow from that. But building that tribal knowledge so we're not wasting spare cycles spinning our wheels when we're like, all right, we need to escalate this or reach out to someone else, because that's really important. I always like to say we have that magic hour, right? If you can't figure it out within an hour, it's time to escalate to someone else on the team, so we can figure it out. The more the merrier, and the better it is. A typical agenda, and that's also important, right? I mean, we're busy, our calendars are full. It's very important to stick to an agenda. If you're going to facilitate an exercise, stick to it. Stick to that tabletop exercise. If you some of the ones I've done have been short as 2 hours because that's all we could get folks together, and the other ones we've done over a day and a half or done multiple scenarios. Maybe we've spent that first session, right? Hey, let's use the tabletop to also review our IR plan. That's a perfect time for it to be fresh in everyone's mind. We've got this newly created incident response plan. Let's spend 30 minutes before we do the tabletop to make sure we're acclimated with it, right? Because you've got turnover, you've got people getting promoted, people that are being moved around, right? So it's important, to really capitalize on that time. You can bring folks together to do a tabletop exercise. Okay, really the incident response, evolution, right? Maybe if you've been doing security for a long time, been with your organization a while, maybe you helped build their security capabilities that currently exist today, right? So how did that start out? Probably started out over an incident, right? Ad hoc, right? To where, oh crap, this happened, we need to respond. This is what we need to do, right? That's how a lot of organizations evolve over time, is from some type of incident. Following the capabilities maturity model, right? Starting out ad hoc, where we have that initial. It's very, very ad hoc. It's kind of chaotic driven, right? During an incident, right? You're just focused on the now. Really no strategy to it. Everyone's going this way, right? Everyone's kind of going every which way, right? No formality or anything like that. To where it becomes repeatable, right? You have a SIM. Maybe you're doing some sandboxing. You build out some repeatable process. Remember we talked about playbooks earlier? So hire a new person. That junior analyst understands how they investigate and respond to various types of alerts. Doesn't necessarily have to be an incident, right? How do I do a Windows-based collection? What do I need to pull? What about Linux? What about Mac OS, right? How do we respond? What type of data, do we need to do? That becomes repeatable, right? As we start moving to define continuous monitoring, being able to do endpoint forensics, tactical intelligence, right? Over here to manage and optimize. Very few organizations get over here, right? Where you've got strategy. And key here, you've got hunt teams, right? You've got your red team, your blue team, security team, continuous monitoring, right? Folks are sharing, strategic intelligence, but also raw intel. I mean, it's great. Lessons learned afterwards, right? Some of the assessments, that I've done and been involved with in the past, it's always great when you start talking to different teams and you find out that the hunt team is their office is right off the SOC. Literally there's a window that's separating them, right? They're together maybe in one part of the building, right? They're in a building together. They do lunch and learns once a week, right? They're sharing war stories. They're talking. That collaboration piece is ongoing. So like I said, very few, and that's what we all strive to get, right? We can get over here to that strategic level. That's kind of, I think, what we all strive for. But the bottom line is no matter what your existing capabilities are, having some type of plan to do that is what's most important, right? Have those conversations now in a stress-free environment versus right in the middle of an incident. One of the worst times to do it. And that's one thing really that we do well, right? My group up here at the top, we're the Incident Response Services team, we collaborate with Talos, and then our ATA folks, which is our MDR, MSSP provider. I mean, we've got, again, when we're engaged in emergency response activities, we're working with our Intel folks, working with Talos to really bring, unparalleled security service to our clients as well. Build a robust IR capability. So if you think about the IR revolution model that I just kind of showed you, tactical intelligence, right? The best form of intel is those raw IR reports, right? The threats that your organization are facing are probably different from others. There's a lot of similarities, but sharing that raw intel is very important. Moving toward, detection, hunting, prevention, triage, right? And moving here, getting back to lessons learned, and then, starting the process, all over again. So, very important. But that's kind of, I guess, in a diagram or in a Visio, kind of what you kind of want to shoot for and evolve with over time. So how do we measure incident response? How fast did we find it? How fast did we respond to it? And how fast did we fix it? I can tell you some of the ones I've been involved with where it's been a third-party notification, say from law enforcement. That often day zero, hour zero, panic mode, do it yourself sets in. It's like what? Oh crap! We just got notified. Maybe it was an IP address, a snort signature, or whatever it was to show. Something happened. So maybe that was 6 months, right? It's our dwell time. How long did the attacker have access to it? But here's we want to get better to drive that down, right? Dwell time. But time to contain, our containment time and business impact time, we own that as responders, as organizations. We own that, the actions we take once we find out. How quick can we remediate it, right? How fast do we respond to it? If we're stuck up here on dwell time, I've had some where dwell time will just go, in good faith effort, the organization will respond to it, what they think, but then they're wiping forensic evidence, they're destroying evidence, artifacts, they have no logging, right? All the things that we've been talking about in security for a while, those things happen. But we really own that piece, right? Containment time and business impact time. All right, resources, of course, our blog site that's out there, blogs.cisco.com. I have a few blog posts that are out there. I just pushed out one last week on Mimikatz logging, PowerShell logging, and all that. Twitter, Cisco Security, Talos Security, of course, there's my Twitter handle. You can reach our IR team, incident response at cisco.com. I'm actually on that, so if anything that goes to that distro, we get. And I guess kind of really the takeaway here is debrief and tell a story. We all have a story to tell every day in our jobs and our roles, right? If you're a student just getting into security, right? Be a sponge, soak up as much as you can. But always, tell a story. Invest in intel and incident response. IR is going to evolve over time and mature, but definitely simplify it for your organization. Any questions? 4 minutes to spare. Yes, sir.
So given your background in law enforcement, is it safe to assume you're familiar with incident command system?
Familiar with what?
ICS.
Yes.
How much value do you think there is in information security practitioners learning ICS versus what's already in our own IR frameworks? Like, are there lessons to still be learned from ICS?
I would say absolutely. So, like ICS that was derived from DHS that built. Okay, I remember because when I was still in, I had to go. Is it 900 series? I don't remember the training. I remember going. Yes, absolutely. I look at my background. Look at the background of folks. On the team. Some of the most important skill set is that incident management skills are so important. There's huge takeaways to that in the information security field, right? Because we're tying that data, we're tying that information back to the organization. There's many similarities to that.
Right.
I see.
Is it redundant in the sense that no, we don't need to go learn ICS, we can get by with our own frameworks, or do you see value in pulling from that bigger framework for incident command?
Yeah, no, yeah, I see. Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is you need to have or there's a lot of frameworks out there, but having that framework, whatever works best for the organization, is the most important. I mean, because a lot of them are, steal an idea here or there and kind of mold it. I mean, especially when you look at like the 800 series in NIST documentation. So yeah, good question. Someone else have a question? I thought I saw a hand over here. Okay. All right.
Who tends to be the best sponsor or driver for a tabletop exercise if you're a private organization that hasn't traditionally done that?
If you've never, the security team, if you've never done one, usually it's the security folks having to drive that to do it. When I've worked with some hospitals that have just started building out a IR, or, the security capability, the risk managers and emergency managers that actually, because the hospital, if there's a bad crash out here on 465, right? The local hospitals know how to mass triage patients, right? If we had 50 patients that came into our emergency room, how do we respond? Hospitals test that often, but yeah, I mean, from what I've seen in my experience, yeah, usually if they've never done a tabletop before, usually the security folks, I mean, we're that tip of that spear, right, driving it, trying to make that happen. But after you do your first one, like I said, it's usually, now you've got buy-in from your organization. Yes, sir.
So we do a lot of tabletop exercises, but they tend to be focused more at the top end in terms of our.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's okay. I didn't say, I've got Snorties, I've got pins. If anyone wants, I got swag, webcam covers. If anyone, I've got plenty of things up here, so happy to share that with folks. So thank you.
Sorry. That's right.